welcome back to Well, That's Interesting, the What in the Holy Hell Are You Talking About edition. Today is episode 209. Researchers are using volcano-bomb cannons to save lives, and these parasitic wasps are being used to save in English manner. My friends, I can see the expression on your face from here. It says, volcano-bomb cannon? I don't know what that is, or even why it is, and it sure doesn't sound like something that's meant to save anybody. Also, wait, parasites are the heroes this time around? What is going on? Well, those are excellent observations and questions, and yes, I agree. Today's topics sound like an hallucinatory fever dream, but I assure you, everything we're going to talk about is very real and actually groundbreaking. No pun intended. In the first half of the show, volcanoes, and the estimated 800 million to 1 billion people that live within 60 miles of them. Needless to say, that is close. And needless to say, that puts many in immediate danger, from things like pyroclastic flows of superheated ash to the infamous and hypnotic creeping lava flows. What may not come to mind, however, are the freshly baked solid chunks of volcanic rock called blocks, or masses of partially solid rocks with a surprise creamy middle of molten lava called bombs. Each can weigh as much as a refrigerator and can easily travel at 230 miles per hour after being shot out of a volcano's vent. Now, if something like that hit you, not much of you would be left. But good news. Bombs and blocks don't need to be hundreds of pounds to inflict damage. A mere 2.5 inches would suffice. For example, way the fuck back in 2018, on the big island of Hawaii, gorgeous Kilauea awoke. And for 5 days, residents had to take turns hosing down area homes whenever these rocks, flung from Fissure 17, landed on roofs. For 5 days, Daryl Clinton was lucky, having avoided these projectiles. On the 6th day, however, his luck ran out. Quote, a piece of molten rock struck Clinton in the ankle as he was on the phone. It knocked him backwards on the 3rd floor lanai of his neighbor's home, and the power of it pushed him off his feet and onto a couch that was promptly lit aflame. When Clinton looked down, as a nearby friend scrambled to wrap a tourniquet around his leg, all he saw was bone protruding from the skin. His ankle dangled awkwardly, and blood spurted forth. All he felt was searing, excruciating pain. I don't know if I was in shock, Clinton said. I just thought about my daughters and knew I was up on that roof, and I was in really bad shape. I knew I had to get out of there. I couldn't pass out. We just had to get out of there. End quote. From A.B.B. Wang of The Washington Post. My friends, Daryl experienced direct contact with a relatively small volcanic bomb that smashed through his shin, shattering the bones all the way down to his foot. I am happy to report, though, that Daryl survived. And I'm happy to report that sometimes even having a roof over your head isn't a 100% guarantee of safety. Without being made of the proper materials to withstand an impact, you might as well be standing outside. So, if you're asking what materials are best to use then, you're not alone. Volcanologists at the University of Auckland, GNS Science, and a vast number of other scientists, engineers, emergency managers, economists, and social scientists all had the same thought. And they decided to combine forces to create a volcano-bomb cannon to shoot at various replica roofs made of various materials. They literally fucked around and found out using a cannon. And we're going to get into that study. And together, we're going to look at some volcano bomb holes, and we're going to compare and contrast. It's going to be great. Then after the break, we are leaving Auckland for England, and volcanoes for moths. And it turns out these little fuckers can cause damage too. My friends, back in 2020 and 2021, lots of things happened, including thousands of common clothes moths infesting parts of an English manor filled with historic tapestry and other very English things. We will get into it. To fight back, the historians there took an unorthodox approach. They turned to an even tinier creature, a parasite who loves them some common clothes moths. We will pry ourselves into this English manor. We will learn about it and the items there. We will learn about this parasite and how in the holy hell introducing another pest worked out, if at all. Today is a wild ride. And hi, I'm Joel Chacha, and if this is your first time listening, welcome to the flock, my explosive business goose. To begin, let's learn a few more fun facts about volcanic ballistics. What do you say? Yeah, me too. I'm very excited. During the intro, we found out that our fiery friends not only like to shoot plumes and gas into the sky, but solid chunks of volcanic rock called blocks, and masses of partially solid rock called bombs too. Not only have these been documented at traveling at 230 miles per hour, they could also be several times hotter than boiling water. And if you happen to find yourself, let's say, 6 miles from an erupting volcano, and you think to yourself, come on, I'm going to be safe right here, right? Well, I would advise to continue moving, as this debris can reach as far as 6 miles. This kind of power is certainly formidable, but not impossible to defend yourself against, to some extent. If you're lucky enough to be somewhere with a roof over your head, what would it take to keep that roof intact from one of these blocks or bombs? This question was on the mind of volcanologists over at DEVORA, an acronym of Determining Volcanic Risk in Auckland. This program was launched, no pun intended, in 2008, but it recently dropped a new study that we're about to dive into. So join me, will you, at the University of Auckland, where we are joined by a hefty number of DEVORA's researchers, including Nicole Allen, a PhD student at the University of Canterbury in New Zealand, Tom Wilson, a disaster risk and resilience researcher at the University of Canterbury, and a hell of a lot of other members of their fiery team. And before we get into the literal crushing details of their paper titled Tephra Cushioning of Ballistic Impacts, Quantifying Building Vulnerability Through Pneumatic Cannon Experiments and Multiple Fragility Curve Fitting Approaches, you might be asking yourself, why in the hell are we in New Zealand, of all places? Why would these beautiful folks from this beautiful place be so interested in volcanoes? Well, great questions, my equally gassy business goose. Turns out, New Zealand is gorgeous as fuck because it's stuffed to the fucking gills with volcanoes. Let's get into it. For my fellow geographically challenged Americans who might not know the shape of New Zealand, don't worry, I've got you. Everyone, please imagine a semicolon. Perfect, thank you. Now, this semicolon is made of 2 islands, a southern island, which is vastly longer than its neighboring northern island, and on that northern island is the city of Auckland, home to about 2 million people, and dead smack in the middle of what's appropriately called the Auckland Volcanic Field. It's 600 square kilometers, or 372 square miles, and it's jam-packed with not 1, not 2, not 37 or 47, but 53 individual volcanic centers. According to volcano.si.edu, the first eruptions in the field began about 193,000 years ago, but good news. Over half of the volcanoes formed in the past 60,000 years, and there were 19 known eruptions within the last 20,000 years. One particular eruption took place sometime between 1400 and 1450 CE, and we know this because humans were there to document the whole spectacle. It was so violent and dramatic, not only were people like, damn, we should write this down or something, but enough lava was spewed and cooled by salt water to form what is now the 4-mile Rangitoto Island. 4 miles. That is a lot of lava. Naturally, if you happen to be living within this 370-ish square mile zone, you probably want to protect your noggin and all your delicate parts. That's why Nicole, Tom, and the team want to know if local roofs could stand up to what volcanoes are throwing down. And if not, what can be done to change that? So, how do you go about testing various roofs and their ability or inability to withstand the force of nature's hellfire? Well, if you said build a cannon of sorts and shoot volcanic rocks at roofs at incredible speeds, you're right. My friends, it's time. Please, drop your groceries, your kitchen knives, or whatever cleaning products you've got in your hands. I'm sure it'll all land safely. Don't worry about it. Pick up your phone and head on over to our social media stuffs. Tap on today's post, and the first thing you're going to see is Nicole decked out in safety gear and standing outside a testing area. Now, swipe on past that, and you're going to see one of the many volcanic blocks used as artillery. Now, these babies ranged anywhere from 2 to 20 pounds, which is nowhere near the size of a refrigerator, but they did the job here. Let me tell you, we'll get into it. Also, a volcanic block that large wouldn't fit in the cannon that was used in this experiment, which isn't your typical cannon you think of when you hear the word cannon. Oh, no, this one, it's a little more complicated. So let's swipe on through. Here we go. And you're going to see a blueprint. I've got it right here. It was provided by the study. And what you're going to see is a vertical device made of a pressure cylinder hooked up to an air compressor. There's a piston under that and an actuating cylinder under that. Inside the actuating cylinder is a rod, and those volcanic blocks you saw, they get impaled onto that. Now, this cannon is hanging vertically above a section of a roof that the team built. And as to how all of this comes together and work, well, I'm going to have Nicole tell you herself. That's right. I'm going to play a part of a video you can watch along on the old tube of you. So all you have to do is search Testing NZ Roofing with Volcanic Ballistics. I'll say that again. That's Testing NZ Roofing with Volcanic Ballistics, and a video from Natural Hazards Commission Tokatuake will pop up. I'm going to start playing at 1 minute and 23 seconds. And the first thing you're going to hear is the sound of that cannon firing. So here we go.
So we're using compressed air to create a vacuum and raise this rod up, which will lock in under our trigger. We can attach the rock then to the end of the rod, and when we fire and release the trigger, the rock will be pushed down onto our roof.
Okay. There you have it. It's intense. My compressed business goose. That was the inner workings of this Volcano-Bomb cannon. And if you had a chance to watch along, you probably noticed the surroundings of the cannon. If you haven't, don't worry. I have screenshots over at our social media stuffs. Take a gander when you can. And let's talk about this setup to get a full 360 of this bombarding experiment. My friends, Nicole and the gang welded together 2 shipping containers and cut a hole in the floor where a roof sample was placed. Now, 3 types of roofs were used. One made of bare material, or one that's just your average Kiwi roof made of tile and concrete. Another with the usual building materials and a layer of what's called scoria on top of it. And scoria, or scoria? I think it's scoria. Anyway, scoria is a fancy way of saying small bits of lava rock. It's dark-colored, glassy, it's igneous, and it forms when lava is ejected from a volcano and it cools while being flung through the air. And finally, type number 3, which was a roof made of the usual materials, but covered with a fine layer of straight-up volcanic ash. Put a pin in all of this. We will get back to it. Now, after all the stages were built and the show commenced with the team... delete. After all the stages were built, the show commenced with the team firing off 46 rounds at speeds of up to 100 miles per hour, with each shot being recorded by a Sony RX10 camera at 960 frames per second. Wow. Before we get into the results, I think just for shits and giggles, I'm going to play a few more seconds of footage so you can hear this cannon and the impacts. I think one wasn't enough. So turn it up. Let's have some fun.
One, two, three.
Okay, fantastic. So after all the dust cleared, what were the results? Drum roll, please. Thank you in the back. From the study, quote, "Our experiments show that the impact resistance of both clay tiles and reinforced concrete slabs is substantially increased when they are covered by tephra." End quote. My friends, my fragile business goose, tephra is a fancy way of saying any fragmented material produced by a volcanic eruption, like volcanic ash and scoria, which means roofs that had a few centimeters of this extra material as a layer actually survived with less damage. And the team has the photos to prove it. Which means, yes, I have the photos to prove it over at our social media stuffs. Just tap on today's post, and I'm going to do the same right here. I have the photos up, and I gotta say, I'm no volcanologist, but I know my holes. That top row across, the one labeled uncushioned targets, these were 3 roofs without ash, and I tell you what, them holes are way bigger when compared to the bottom row, which are 3 photos of the cushioned targets. In fact, I don't see any holes at all, just some cracks. It's really shocking. And I'm sure you're kind of shocked too, because you're thinking the same thing I'm thinking. Wait, ash? The same stuff that's denser than water and causes roofs to collapse? It could actually help in some amounts? If you thought that too, then yeah, we are not alone. Quote, if you've got an eruption that's going to pump out some ballistics, some volcanic bombs, you actually want a layer of ash. Rebecca Williams, a volcanologist at the University of Hull in England who wasn't involved with the research, said to Robin Andrews of Gizmodo. The team's tests show that a thin layer of ash reduces the damage caused by some incoming bombs. It acts like a cushion on the roof, which is really cool, and that's completely counterintuitive. End quote. Turns out, my friends, a mere 5 centimeter or 2-inch layer of tephra was all that was needed to triple what the team called the roof material penetration threshold, which is a suggestive and aggressive way of saying the amount of energy needed to break the tiles and concrete. Having just a 2-inch layer was enough to bump that threshold to up threefold. Okay. And the news gets even better. It doesn't rhyme as much, but it gets better if you take into account that the, quote, relatively light load exerted by a 5 centimeter layer of tephra is likely to have a negligible effect on roof collapse probability, at least for engineered structures in good condition. End quote from the study. So, in sum, if engineers can incorporate this material into new and existing roofs for residents in zones like the Auckland volcanic field, it could be a game changer. Who could have guessed that a possible solution was part of the volcano itself? After the break, Bust out your finest tea set. We're getting stately. We're heading on over to merry old England, where conservationists at the Blickling Hall found themselves in a not-so-merry situation. Thousands of moths were having their way with hundreds of years of old fabrics. And to stop them, conservationists had to fight fire with fire. Or rather, bugs with bugs. Anyway, you're going to want to stay tuned.
Imagine what's possible when learning doesn't get in the way of life. At Capella University, our game-changing FlexPath learning format lets you set your own deadlines so you can learn at a time and pace that works for you. It's an education you can tailor to your schedule. That means you don't have to put your life on hold to pursue your professional goals. Instead, enjoy learning your way and earn your degree without missing a beat. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
If you're listening to this podcast, then we know you love learning. So let me tell you about Airwave History Plus, now available on Apple Podcasts. Airwave History Plus is your ticket to ad-free listening, bonus content, and early episodes from dozens of the most popular history podcasts, including History That Doesn't Suck, The Explorers Podcast, The History of World War II, Queen's Podcast, The History of Egypt, The Age of Napoleon, and more. For your free trial, search Airwave History Plus on Apple Podcasts and hit subscribe. That's Airwave History Plus, available now on Apple Podcasts. Airwave History Plus, the essential audio destination for history lovers.
And we're back. We are so back. And my friends, I'm going to ask you to charge up the old time machine and dial it back several lifetimes to 2021. With us in the back seat are a number of dusters, vacuums, and other cleaning doodads because today we're volunteering to help reopen Blickling Hall, which, thanks to a little thing called COVID, had been closed to the public for over a year. And for my fellow geographically challenged Americans who may be wondering why we're being put to work and where in the holy hell Blickling Hall may be, don't worry, I've got you. Please, everyone, imagine England. Fantastic. Point to the very southeast corner, and you'll find London. Okay, now move your finger diagonally up and to the right, just short of the coastline. Perfect. There is Blickling Hall, an absolute behemoth of an estate that's 5,000 acres in size. My friends, swipe past all that Canon action on our social media stuffs and you shall behold the main building of Blickling Hall, which is stunning and without a doubt the most British thing you're going to see all day. Built in 1616, its design is the definition of both Jacobean and Georgian architecture, and its library feels like an endless hall, containing one of the most historically significant collections of manuscripts and books in England, with an estimated 13,000 to 14,000 volumes. Well, being simultaneously expensive and priceless, since 1940 the hall has been in the care of the National Trust, a heritage and nature conservation charity with many a members like Hilary Jarvis, Assistant National Conservator, who we are helping out today. For you see, this place has more than just thousands of books. Every room is filled with tapestries, textiles, and other treasures made of fabric that are irreplaceable. Just to put what is here into perspective, on this same land, it's believed Anne Boleyn was born. She eventually became the second wife of dipshit King Henry VIII for 3 short years when she was beheaded in 1536. There's also an 18th century tapestry of Tsar Peter I of Russia, given by his eventual successor, Catherine the Great, to one of the building's former owners. Peter is on a rearing horse with an eagle soaring above him. It's giving "I just triumphed over the Swedes" vibes. Anyway, today, we are going to assist the house team with throwing open the doors and giving the objects here a much-needed cleaning after being isolated in 2020. But there seems to be a problem. Actually, there are 2,455 problems. This was the number of common clothes moths that had infested the manor, and yes, someone counted. My equally shiny business goose, if you swipe past the grandeur of Blickling Hall, you'll see a photo of this moth. It's a wee half-inch in size, and it has a bit of a sheen to it. Also fun is its scientific name, Tiniola biseliella. Yeah, say it with me now. Tiniola biseliella. Oh, great job. Now, these little babies can cause some problems, especially for the conservationists here at the Hall. They love them some carpets, curtains, soft furniture, and clothing made of wool and silk. They just can't get enough. And for many people, this infestation would be met with panic. However, in a most British fashion, Hilary Jarvis kept calm and carried on by getting histrionics on the horn. Now, what the fuck is histrionics and what the fuck does getting them on the horn mean? Well, for my youngins, that means calling someone, and histrionics is a company well known for two things. One, their website. Oh my God. Their website was designed in 2005 and it hasn't changed since. It's a fucking time capsule in and of itself. Oh, please check it out. Histrionics.com. It is the 1600s of websites and I fucking love it. And two, this company provides innovative, multi-tiered approaches for museums and historical sites facing the same pickle Blickling Hall found itself in. Overrun with pests, including the likes of Tiniola. David Laughlin, the manager of Histrionics, answered Hilary's call and they joined forces, embarking on a groundbreaking new pest control trial for the estate. Their plan was to introduce another kind of pest. Everyone, please, drop whatever sharp object you're holding and pick up your phone. You're going to want to see this even teenier creature, or at least try to see it. In that photo is a piece of paper, and there's some typeface on it, maybe 11 or 12 point, and you'd be forgiven if you don't see this wasp. It's literally dwarfed by the font. This whisper of a wasp is called Trichogramma evanescens, and it's no bigger than the head of a pin. It clocks in at a mere 0.5 millimeters in size, and its lifespan is just as small, clocking in at only 2 weeks. But in that time frame, this bug lives like it knows its battery is on 1%. Their imperceptibly small wings are practically useless, so they, quote, walk fast, said Mélanie Saint-Onge, scientific director at the Canadian firm Anatis Bioprotection. She was not involved in the study, or the trial, I should say, but she told Atlas Obscura, quote, the insects have one goal during their 2-week lifespan. All they do is search for moth eggs. They walk around saying, I just want to reproduce, end quote. So yes, my full-sized business goose, these wasps have absolutely no chill, frantically speed-walking their way to moth eggs. They don't eat. They don't even have time to excrete waste. They have one goal and one goal only. Parasitize, it's a hard word to say, parasitize moth eggs. That is their plan. And it's got 4 parts. Are you ready? 1, find an egg. Great. 2, egg examination. By using her antenna, the female wasp examines the moth egg to her liking, which leads to part 3, egg drilling and egg laying. Yes, using a wee tube, the female pokes a hole into the moth egg and dispenses some of her own, leading to part 4, egg development. 20 to 30 wasps can develop inside a single moth egg, which, as you can imagine, is bad news for the young moth. The caterpillar inside is basically fuel for the baby wasps, who in just a few short days chew their way out of this food container as adults. ready to speedwalk their way to another moth egg and repeat the process. This plan, well, it's daring, it's ingenious, but decimating the number of moth eggs was just one part of it. They wanted to prevent eggs from being laid to begin with, so they busted out some pheromone tabs. Essentially, these are chalky tabs that are electrostatically charged with female moth pheromones. So when a male comes a-knocking, he'll only find some strange-looking cubes, and he'll be disappointed and fly off. But first, having coated himself in that female hormone. Other males will try to buy him a drink and will end up being just as disappointed. So, for Hillary and David, the plan seemed airtight. But there was one setback. Dead bodies. Yes, thousands and thousands of dead wasp bodies. One, as you can see, is practically nothing, but we're talking hordes here. That'll end up looking like small piles of dust, and in a place so manicured as Blickling Hall, that is unacceptable. Quote, "Dust is our number one villain. We are paranoid about dust," Hillary told Gemma Tarlac of Alice Obscura, who went on to report that the House team, in a most British manner, responded to this concern by forming a, quote, "rigorous daily cleaning protocol based on research that has determined where dust particles are most likely to fall," end quote. Well, now that that was taken care of, what happened once the tabs and the wasps were released to take care of the moths, which is a plot so reminiscent of the Simpsons episode Bart the Mother? Anyone? Yep. Shout out to my business geese who get the reference, snake-eating gorillas, which will simply freeze to death. Anyway, let's find out what happened here in this real-life tale. Quote, "The pheromone and wasp combination achieved a drastic 83% reduction in moth numbers, helping safeguard the Hall's precious collections," end quote, from nationaltrust.org.uk. It worked. It actually worked, my murderous friends. The trial was such a success that the House team performed it again in March of 2022. But this time, with one heartwarming exception. Quote, "The micro-wasps performed well in terms of reducing moth population in combination..." Let's do that again. You ready? I'm doing great. Quote, "The micro-wasps performed well in terms of reducing moth populations in combination with pheromones, but no better than where we'd use pheromones alone. We think that it's too great a task for them to locate moth eggs in our lofty interiors, particularly since we can only place the dispensers where we suspect the eggs may be," end quote, from Hillary on the National Trust website. My friends, the teeny wasps were retired. And you know what? I hope there's an equally teeny plaque somewhere in these lofty interiors honoring them and their service. So let's get on that. In the meantime, Hillary and the House gang are only using the pheromone tabs to keep the moths disappointed and at bay. And now that they are no longer preoccupied with collecting and removing dead bodies, the team has other projects to work on, like repairing cracks in the historic lime plaster of the ceiling in the upper anteroom. How exciting. And thank you for listening, rating, subscribing, telling your friends about Volcano-Bomb cannons. Fuck yeah. And then wrap it up with some Parasitic Wasp action. It's just as exciting, trust me. And an explosive thanks to the folks over at Airwave Media, the podcast network to which WTI belongs. If you love this show, and you do, you love the other podcasts in this family. And please, stay interesting.